Yeah, hi friends. This is Wasim Ahmed once again, and I'm here with you today to discuss your IG2 risk assessment report as promised in my last video. I am happy that most of you are relaxed after your exam finished on 7th of August, and now people should move ahead to achieve the second milestone, which is your risk assessment report. So, in this video, I will be telling you how to make an effective risk assessment report to achieve some good marks. Because looking at the history, I would like to share with you that I've seen many people are failing in IG2 report also, which is not at all acceptable because this is an area in which you can improve. Even if your exam was not good, you can improve in your IG2 report, and you can further look for distinctions and credits. This area can give you good marks if properly done. So we'll be discussing all tips and tricks to pass your exam, especially through this second milestone, which is your risk assessment report. So let's continue. Yeah, hi friends, this is Wasim Ahmed again, and as I promised in my last video, that we'll be coming up with another video in which we'll be talking about how to make your IG2 report, which is your risk assessment report. Today, we will be discussing how to make an effective risk assessment report to be submitted to NEBOSH. People have sometimes they have a misconception that report doesn't need much importance and time, and since they have the privilege to go anywhere, or they will be having some privilege on the time frame also, and they will be completing it at the last moment. But this is not the way they should think. Report is your second exam. It should be given utmost importance, and this is one of the area in which you can gain maximum marks to ensure your credits and distinctions. So we'll be discussing some important tips you need to keep in mind to make your reports effective. And this is the right time. I think people are busy in making their reports now after exam. So hope that this video will be helping you out in gaining some marks in your IG2 reports. So let's start. So friends, at start I would like to inform you that your report is consisting of four major stages, and you need to complete all of these four stages to get pass in the exam. If one of the stage mentioned on this screen is missing in your report completely, you will get refer, you will not pass the exam. So let's have a look onto these stages. The first stage is description of the organization and methodology used. So mainly in this stage, we'll be describing what kind of organization is that in which you are going to do risk assessment. We'll be looking at introduction part mainly, the type of the organization, the nature of business they are involved in, the nature of activities they are involved in, the number of people, the shift patterns, the areas, and all of those introductory parts about the organization will be covered here. Second most important thing is methodology in the first part. What methods you use to collect the information for your risk assessment report. So we'll be looking at some of the methodologies, what should be discussed in this part. Then your risk assessment, typically, what are the hazards, what are the risk levels associated with them, and all of those five steps which include in your risk assessments. Then we'll be prioritizing three important recommendations you have made in your report. So, for example, you come up with 10 hazards, and out of those 10 hazards, three are really critical areas which should be taken, on top priority to be controlled. So, we'll be discussing those three important actions with justifications why they are important, what kind of losses are expected if they are not taken care of. And finally, the review frequencies, how frequently this report should be reviewed, monthly basis or quarterly basis or yearly basis, looking at the nature of the business, and communication, how you're going to communicate your finding with the people interested, for example, the management group, the middle management group, the worker level, whatever you come out after this report with, you need to communicate to the concerned people. And finally, how you're going to check the corrective actions. So these are the four important things which will be including in your report, and you need to cover each and every area professionally. So let's start. So friends, if we look at the first stage of assessment, these are some of the important points to be kept in mind. And for example, the first part is description of organization and methodology. So you need to select an organization on which you are going to do risk assessment first of all. And it can be any type of organization. It is not important that you select the organization in which you are working. It can be any organization, any area, any activity you can select. But most important thing is that you need to cover some of the information which is factual information. If you want to hide the name of the organization, no problem. You can simply write XYZ organization or ABC organization. Even you can hide the location also. But rest of the information should be factual information. It should be the same information you have collected using different information sources. So this is first thing you should keep in mind. Secondly, you need to provide the scope of risk assessment. It is very important whether you are going to do risk assessment on a complete organization or it is a part of organization. If it is a part of organization, what part of the organization? Maybe you selected warehouse department, maybe you selected a shipping department. It depends, but you need to clearly define the scope of the risk assessment. And I would always suggest you select a smaller area, but an area in which you have variety of hazards. You cannot do risk assessment on a complete organization in one go. It is always good idea to go in parts. So the more smaller area or activity you are going to select, the more easy you will be to go ahead and discuss some of the important things there in that specific area, and you can control it, you can control the information, you can control the hazards, you can cover up each and everything in that specific location or part or area of the business. Then provide minimum the following information. Your introductory part should cover the name, the address of the site, location. For example, it can be, you can simply write XYZ organization Jeddah, Saudi Arabia in the name, and some of the other information as guided in your report. You need to provide what kind of activities are going on, what kind of people are involved. If you have vulnerable group people there, you need to highlight those people also. For example, you have handicapped people, or maybe you have a disabled worker there. You need to clearly define here. Also, you need to define what kind of equipment is there in the area, what kind of activities are going on, what are the shift patterns. Maybe they are working in 2 shifts or 3 shifts. You need to define it clearly. Any weekends you need to clearly define in the introductory part. So you need to give it an introductory part. You need to provide all the basic informations, and some of the guidelines are already mentioned on the templates of your report, which are given to you by your learning partners, which is mainly a product of NEBOSH. So each and everything is clearly mentioned there, what you need to write in that specific area. Also, how many word count requirement is there, that is also mentioned. For example, you need to mention 200 to 300 words in your introductory part, so you need to stick to that word count requirement also. So guys, as we were talking about some of the basic information you need to provide in the first area, you need to provide number of workers employed by the organization, also total number of people, what are the number of people in that specific area which you are going to do risk assessment on. Also some general description of the product, services, activities they are involved in, and shift patterns as I told you in the earlier slide also. Description of the area to be included in risk assessment. What kind of area is that? It is 60 meter by 60 meter hall with 2 doors, or any kind of information. For example, you need to add here about the area and any other relevant information. Who is responsible for day-to-day health and safety matters? Maybe they have a safety manager or a safety supervisor. You need to provide this information also, because later on you will be describing the name of a person you interviewed there to collect some information. So health and safety manager or such people are the right people whom you are going to do interview to get some data out of them. So these are some of the information. I put one example here also, if you can see down. This is an example of introduction of an organization. which is the first part of your report. So friends, in the same first stage of your risk assessment, the second most important thing you need to talk about is methodology you use to collect the information. These are some of the sources of information. You need to inform them how you collected information to do your risk assessment. So we can use any method to collect information. I put some of the examples here for you. For example, you consulted some of the legal references from websites. You have to write them in this format. For example, you used ILO website or you use hse.gov.uk website to collect some of the information on legal references. You have to put it here. Also, maybe second source of information, you interviewed the management and the workers at site. So maybe you interviewed the HSE managers to get some information, or you interviewed the workers to ask about the current situations on the site. You need to put this information source also here. And on the third source, you visited the site tour, site survey you did for risk assessment to identify the hazards and risk at site, or to have some observation, or any other source you used. If you remember in your coursework, you studied some of the sources of information, internal, external sources, web sources. You can define any source here which you used while collection of the information during your risk assessment report. So here we complete your first stage of risk assessment, where you have to tell them something about organization, and you need to tell them something about the collection of information sources. So your first stage complete here. So friends, the second important stage of your report is risk assessment, and that's what we are going to talk about here. Risk assessment is very important part of this report, and the most important thing you need to keep in mind that you need to cover 5 different categories of hazards to come up with 10 total hazards to be used in the risk assessment report. So there will be total 10 hazards you need to write in your report, but those 10 hazards should come from 5 different categories, not of the same nature. You cannot, for example, if there is a construction site, and you cannot come up with all 10 hazards from the same activity or same size, same nature of hazards. You need to cover 5 different categories. So looking at the screenshot here, these are the major categories of hazards: physical and psychological health, musculoskeletal health, chemical and biological agents, general workplace issues, work equipment, fire and electricity. And to give you more detailed idea, if you look at the second screenshot here, there are subcategories of hazards. Like for example, physical, psychological health, there are noise, vibration, radiation, mental ill health, violence at work, and substance abuse. So you need to select 10 hazards from all of these different categories to show to the examiner that yes, there are variety of hazards, not only one kind of hazards you have identified. And this is how you have to define 10 different hazards in your report. So friends, this is also very important to know that your risk assessment report will carry 6 columns, and in those 6 columns you have to provide different kind of information in a proper format. I will show you those 6 columns and one of the field example in the next slide. But before moving to that area, we need to look at it each and every column, and we will be discussing how and what you need to provide in those columns. So if you look at the first column, provide hazard and the hazard category. This is very important. Most of the times I have seen many reports, people are not filling it properly, and they always have ambiguity in the hazard category and hazard category is the major part, major area of hazard, as we discussed in previous slides. So you might have 5 or 6 major categories, out of which the hazard itself is a subcategory of that category. So for example, if fire we selected as one category, fire hazards will be the main category, and then down there you might come up with a hazard that observed at site one of the fire door was blocked, which might delay the emergency evacuations in case of fire. So you need to be very clear in writing your hazard writing styles are very important. And as I told you, people always have ambiguities in the main category of hazard and the hazard itself. They don't know how to write hazard exactly. So guys, you need to be very clear. You need to be very clear, because on the basis of your hazard identification here, now everything will be based on your hazard in the next 5 columns, what you are going to talk. So if you are not clear on the first stance, you might not gain the examiner's attention. So some people have seen they are writing housekeeping hazard, for example. Guys, housekeeping is not a hazard. Housekeeping is very good activity, but poor housekeeping at site is a hazard. So you need to be very clear in defining the hazards. Okay. Secondly, who might be harmed and how in second column. So here you need to be very careful in identifying people who are at risk. So for example, if it's a construction site and you are talking about trenching hazards, so you need to define anyone who is directly or indirectly involved in that specific activity in that area. You need to cover each and every one very carefully, and even the trespassers, even the general public people, some of the vulnerable people if you have at your site. You need to cover each and every category of people who might be harmed out of that activity. This is one thing. Second thing is how they will get harmed. You need to inform examiner exactly by defining the hazardous event. So for example, we are talking about falling of people and vehicle in trenching, one hazard. So you will define it clearly that these are the group of people will be harmed, and if they are falling from height from the road to the trench, they might get broken bones or fatalities or disabling injuries or whatever. You need to clearly define each and everything here. If you look at the third column, what controls are available already? Here you need to define all of those controls which are already taken by the organization, which you observed at site, which are already there present on the site. So for example, you might have seen some of the barricades are there in the area, or some of the basic control signboards are already there, but you think these are not enough. Then in the fourth column, you are going to add up some of the control to reduce the risk levels. So you might go with more sophisticated controls. You have to prove that yes, the earlier available controls are not adequate, they are not enough, and further controls are required. So in the additional control column, you are going to define your controls here. One thing you should keep in mind while talking about controls, I've seen another common mistake by people. They start putting PPEs on top. PPE control is a weaker control, as we know, and it should be discussed on the bottom. So you should always talk about elimination controls, and then later on substitutions, engineering controls, administrative controls, and PPEs. So while putting controls, keep hierarchy of control in your mind. If you look at column number 5, what time scales are for completion of actions? So now you suggested one control. You need to be logical in defining the time frame. You cannot say that, for example, if you need to stop the activity, for example, it is very critical job, it is very critical issue, and you are planning to put a control to stop the activity immediately. Then you need to write in the time frame column immediately. You cannot write 1 week or 1 day or 2 hours. It's a critical issue. You have to write the time scale also. For example, if it is a training issue and you think that the people should be trained in that area, for sure we all know that training need a little bit more time. You need to arrange a trainer. You need to arrange the people also at site. You need to arrange some resources. So you can put here 1 week time, 2 week time. If it is a procedure development, then it might take some more time. If it's a machine required at site, then you can look at the feasibility of the control, and you need to put a logical and feasible control with the time scales also. In your column number 6, you will be defining the role of persons completing those tasks. So for example, here you need to write, for example, you put one control to develop a safe system of work. You cannot put here production manager is in charge for this job. We all know that health and safety department, safety manager is the right person to develop a safe system of work in coordination with other people, but he should be responsible for this control. So all of these things, guys, you need to be very logical in defining, and you should make sure that the examiner get an idea what you are talking is the right thing. So guys, here I come up with one of the solved example of writing one hazard. So if you look at the first column as we discussed, working at height is a major category of hazard. And then what exactly the hazard is: people and or items falling into the inspection pit whilst work is being carried out in this area. So it is very clear now. Working at height is a major category, and what exactly the hazard related to this category is written down there clearly. Now in the second column, anyone working in around the inspection pit, they are the people who are going to get harmed. And how they are going to get harmed? Likely injuries include bruising, sprains, strains, fractures, or more serious injuries like head, internal injuries, worst cases death. These type of injuries are likely to be life changing and involve the worker being in constant considerable pain. For example, the worker may no longer be able to work after such a fail, need to rely on family, friends for constant care. So this is how you need to define the impact of this hazard on somebody's life. So you need to be very clear in what kind of people are going to be affected out of this hazard and how they are going to get affected. Third column is what controls are already there. So as I told you earlier also, you need to come up with some of the controls you observed on site, and you need to list down those controls. For example, in this case, when inspection pit is in use, the area is restricted by use of barriers for those working near the area. This is one of the control already in place, and people they take care of or other people in the area, and they restrict entry of other people in the area. Fixed stairs to allow safe access and ingress to the inspection pit. So this is another control. Inspection pit is covered when not in use. This is one more control already there. Lone working is not allowed. Another control. The workplace managers regularly monitors the use of excess equipment and work in the inspection pit. So these are some of the controls you highlighted here, which are already there in the area and which are maintained by the people there. But you think there are some other controls required. So in the fourth column, you can see some additional controls. For example, they suggested purchase a mobile bridge to allow mechanics to be able to safely access both sides of the inspection pit when working at ground level. So this is more sophisticated control. Now here you are providing one of the bridge between both sides so that people may not fall. Now they are using staircases to go down and then go to the other area. So this is another control they suggested. Add the bridge into the maintenance schedule, need to be inspected at least every 6 months. This is after putting a bridge, for sure bridge will have certain requirements, so they put additional control here. And arrange for all workers to be trained in how to use that bridge safely. So he introduced one control and some sub controls here to eliminate the hazard or to reduce the hazard. And in front on fifth column, you can see they put some time frames. So we all know that putting a bridge, bringing a bridge, fabrication of a bridge takes time. So the guy put here 2 months, and for sure maintenance will be once the bridge is installed after that. So it is also 2 months, and people will be trained on use of bridge 2 months following the purchase of the bridge. Once the bridge is in place, then for sure after that people will be trained also. And in the last column you can see people responsible for this activity or this action. So workshop and store managers, for all actions they are responsible here. So this is how you are going to write completely one hazard, and this is how you need to cover each and every column. So friends, here now we are on third stage of your report, and in third stage of report This is very important area, and most of the people they don't know what to do here in this part of report. Guys, we highlighted 10 hazards in our risk assessment form, and we highlighted some of the actions to be taken immediately. So you need to select three most critical areas of your risk assessment report, which we talked in the previous slide. Three most critical actions you have advised the management should take. You need to select all those three actions, and you need to keep talking on the importance and other related points on those three areas, because you need to convince management to take those three actions on urgent basis, and you need to do this job. You need to highlight some of the important areas of concern in front of management so that they should take this action. So upon completion of risk assessment and allocation of all actions, pick three highest priority, most urgent actions and provide adequate justification using moral, legal and financial arguments to convince the management. Guys, you need to discuss here one by one all of those three actions you have recommended, why you have recommended those actions, what is the legal, moral and financial implication of those actions if not taken. For example, you need to convince management here that if this action is not taken, it might put the organization into breach of moral duties of employer, also breach of legal duties where they are going to breach the laws and different regulations, and it might have a financial impact. If things may go worst, company might have to suffer from financial burdens and losses later on. So you need to make your point here very clear in front of management that these actions are very important and they should be given utmost priority to avoid all of these moral, legal and financial impacts on business. Use arguments based on legal references, or you can use legal references also. For example, you observed in the case of trenching we were discussing, you observed the area is not safe. So you can use here as per ILO C155R164, employer has a duty to provide safe workplace to employees. But in this case, employer failed to provide safe workplace and people might suffer in different ways. So you need to convince the management that they are already involved into a breach of legal issue, into a breach of regulation. You can quote local references of your country, you can quote international references as we discussed, ILO references and all that. But you need to convince management to make your point here to take those actions immediately. And then you need to define how effective each action will be in terms of controlling risk, time scales and impact of actions. So at the end, you need to conclude saying management that if they take this control, what are the benefits they are going to get, and also you need to justify your control in terms of time, cost and effort. That this control might not take much time, might not involve much cost and effort, and it will bring you, it will save you from all of those implications which you discussed on top, legal, moral and financial. So, you need to sell your idea here to the management. You need to discuss all of these three important actions in a way that management is happy to take that control in place and they approve all of those controls, they provide you resources accordingly. So in the last stage of your risk assessment, this is review, communicate and check stage. And in this stage, now since we are already done with completing risk assessment, we need to highlight few things here also. For example, setting realistic review date of your risk assessment. You need to provide the next review date of your risk assessment, and most of the time it depends on the nature of business or nature of activities. The more frequent changes you have in the operation, the more frequent should be risk assessment. So it can be monthly, it can be quarterly, it can be yearly, depending on the nature of the area you are going to do risk assessment on, nature of activities and all of those things. You need to provide review frequency and the next review date here. Also, you need to indicate how findings of your risk assessment will be communicated to the concerned and whom to communicate. So once your report is ready, whom you are going to send this report, whom you are going to discuss with this report, and what would be the method of communication. So would it be a meeting, immediate meeting after a report? You might call immediate meeting and you call all the stakeholders in that meeting and you discuss and you highlight the areas of concern, or you might be sending emails to your management with the copy of this report to give them an idea, or if a worker level, you might be talking these things on daily safety meetings or toolbox talks to highlight areas of concern in your report. It's your own methodology how you are going to communicate the findings of this risk assessment report. Finally, indicate how you will follow up on actions needed to be completed. So it's not, the story is not ending here. After this report, for sure you will be developing a corrective action register also, in which you will involve all of those people who are mentioned in the last column of your risk assessment, and you need to assign some of the actions to all of those people who are concerned people, and you need to buy in their interest, you need to buy in their commitment in fulfilling those jobs in due course of times. So how you are going to do this and how you are going to follow up whether the action is taken by the concerned within due time frame or not. This is now you have to define here. So for example, you can say I will make a corrective action register with the due dates and the people who are going to take actions, and then I keep on following every week or every day or every month depending on the action timings, and I will make sure that they are given the resources to take actions and the actions are in place within time frame, and I will make sure that within 1 week of completion of all of those controls, things are in place and people have taken all of those controls which they were supposed to take. So friends, at the end, there are some general guidelines to make your risk assessments, and I would suggest you complete your assessment electronically. You have both options. You can do it by a handwriting method also as per NEBOSH, but I would always suggest you to do it electronically, because you will not be facing any problem in the word count if you are doing it in a word format and electronically. Word count is already given in that the privilege is given that you know how many words you have completed, how many remaining. Also, you will not have any problem with the grammatical mistakes, spelling mistakes. You can correct them electronically. So always do it in a word format given by your learning partner, rather you do it by hand. Also, one of the important issue is that if the examiner, if the assessor is not understanding your handwritten language, then then you will get a problem later on. You might not be securing good marks in that, because if somebody is not understanding what you have written, then for sure he might not score you very well. Double click the footer of your assessment to include your student number and other information required as per the guidelines given in the report. So you need to provide a certain type of information, what is your learner number and the training partner and all that. You need to make sure that this information is available in the bottom of each page of your risk assessment. Ensure completing all information required on each page, like student number, page 1 of 8, 1 of 9, 1 of 10, whatever, how many pages you have in total and which page is this. This information should also be there. And carefully read IG2 guidance notes provided by your tutor to ensure passing it properly. There are notes given by NEBOSH themselves and the syllabus bodies that what you need to look at while preparing your report. So just consult those notes to make sure your reports are suitable and sufficient and they carry all the information required. Everyone need to meet minimum criteria to pass, otherwise he will receive a refer. And the minimum criteria to pass your report is complete all of 4 stages of your report. The quality of one of these stage, if it is weak, no problem, but you cannot quit, you cannot leave one complete stage of your risk assessment. Complete all four stages which we discussed to pass the report. So friends, I think I tried to cover almost everything related to your report, and I hope that these discussions will help you in making attractive, effective reports to be submitted to NEBOSH. Hope that this information will help you. So if there is any ambiguity, you are most welcome to contact me anytime, and I'll be coming up with another video very shortly, which is another critical thing to be discussed. And I had many queries from people on interview techniques, interview ambiguities. So for sure, your exam is already finished, your report will be submitted, and the next thing in the pipeline would be your interview, which is starting from 10th of August to 20th of August. Within these 10 days, your interviews will complete with NEBOSH. So we'll be talking about some tips and tricks to pass your interviews also, because that is the most critical point, I would say, because whatever you have done using open book examination, you have done already, but now the assessor, the examiner would like to make sure that there was no malpractice used in the exam. So this also is very critical area you need to cover successfully. So we'll be discussing some of the important things to be considered, some of the important points to be kept in mind before interview, so that you are well prepared for the interviews. So very soon you will have another video on interview techniques, on how to pass the interview, how to move on.